Hello, I'm Cathy and welcome to Lunar Bird Book Club. Today I'm going to talk about Wuthering Heights because I have recently reread this, and very soon, in fact maybe even by the time this video is out, there's going to be a new film adaptation out of Wuthering Heights that is called Wuthering Heights in quotation marks, apparently to give us all a big notification that this particular adaptation of Wuthering Heights is not going to be very true to its source, which hurts deeply already going into it, but you know, I probably will end up watching it anyway, and who knows, maybe I'll like it, maybe I'll have a good time. But because I've just recently reread this, I have a lot of thoughts and opinions that I want to share. I think what I really want to do today is give you the definitive answer on which interpretations or fan theories about this book are correct or not. Now, I've studied English literature at degree level, and I know that in studying literature there actually isn't any right or wrong answers. It's interpretation, it's subjective, it's thought and opinion and analysis, and it's very hard to come to a clear black and white answer about anything to do with English literature because it's just so very subjective. Art, taste, opinions, feelings, philosophy. Who's to say what's right or what's wrong? I am to say what's right or what's wrong, because this is one of those books where, again, I know this is unreasonable, but in case you didn't know that Wuthering Heights, it's actually my book. It was written for me. It's one of my favourite books, and I absolutely love it. My name is Cathy, partly because my mum also really loved this book. I don't think she wanted me to turn out like either of the Cathys or Catherines in this book, but she did like the name, which, you know, fair enough. Yeah, so I've read this numerous times. I make regular trips to Haworth and walk around the moors. You see these jars behind me? Ugh. Okay, I made these along with many others for my wedding 12 years ago, and they are wrapped up in pages of Wuthering Heights from a copy that was so beat up and well read that it couldn't be used as a book anymore. So Wuthering Heights was part of my wedding decoration, and now look, I still have these jars, and I bet if I started reading the page I could tell you where in the story this happened. I'm not going to, but you know, like, I'm just showing you, I love this book. I really love this book. But despite me really loving this book, it's actually been a few years since I last read it. And I think over the last couple of years, because, you know, this book turns up in conversations such a lot, that even I had begun to be swayed by certain interpretations of the book. But reading it again has made me come down very firmly on some sides of Wuthering Heights debates, and I want to share that with you now so that you will know and everyone will know what's the correct way to read this book. And there's going to be many spoilers ahead, and just in case I'm failing at tone here, I am being a bit flippant and sarcastic, and of course you can enjoy and appreciate this book in any way you so choose. But if you don't choose to enjoy it and appreciate it in the way I do, you're doing it wrong and you'll miss out. Okay, first things first. Is Wuthering Heights a ghost story? Yes. Yes, it is. Now, there are some people out there who will try and tell you that all of it is like a psychological horror, and any ghostly occurrences that happen is just people reacting to the claustrophobic, tense atmosphere and people's like energies and the mental anguish. No. I mean, yes, it is claustrophobic. Yes, it's unnerving. Yes, people are acting in an unsettling way that might make you summon up ghosts, but I just don't think it's fun if it's not an actual ghost story. So yes, there are actual ghosts in Wuthering Heights, and I think you'll have so much more fun if you read it as a ghost story. And I'll tell you something that really convinced me of this, and I've forgotten a book, so just give me a moment. Right, okay, this is what's really convinced me that Wuthering Heights is a ghost story. I read last year this book called Cornish Horrors, Tales from the Land's End. I ran up and down the stairs too fast and now I'm out of breath. So this is a collection of ghost stories set in Cornwall, written mostly before the 1900s. And a lot of these ghost stories came from the same time that Emily Bronte was reading and writing. Lots of these stories about Cornwall have the same format. A man travels from the civilised areas of England, like London. Maybe he's travelling to escape a seedy situation, or he's undergone some trauma and he's coming to the countryside for his health. And he's enamoured with the wild ruggedness of Cornwall, and then he meets the people who live there who are quite rustic and strange, and then he hears and then something weird happens, and then somebody explains to him the ghost story that makes the weird thing make sense. It's a common trope of writing ghost stories, and all of that also happens in Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights starts with Lockwood travelling, I think, from London, and he takes up a tenancy in Thrushcross Grange to heal from a scandal he has unwittingly caused. He's broken a young girl's heart. And whilst there, he experiences a haunting of Catherine Linton at Wuthering Heights. And then Nellie, his housekeeper, tells him the story that would explain why is a ghostly woman haunting Wuthering Heights. So yes, it's a ghost story. And I'd also say anything else that happens in this book that could possibly be supernatural, you'll have way more fun if you accept, yes, that's a supernatural thing. So when Catherine is ill and raving, and then she looks out from her window and it's as if she can see Wuthering Heights even though she couldn't possibly. And she calls Heathcliff out to join her, and she has a vision of Joseph lighting the lights in Wuthering Heights, and she kind of has visions. It's so much more fun if you think, yes, actually, she is so on the boundary line between life and death that she can see into the future a little bit. She can see into like the other world realities. Wuthering Heights is a ghost story, and it ends with the ghostly haunting of Catherine driving Heathcliff to an early death because, why? Because she wants to be with him, because she wants to stop him from blotting out the last chance of happiness for Hareton and young Catherine. Maybe. But yeah, it's a ghost story. It starts with a ghost story and it ends with death by ghost. It's a ghost story. Is Wuthering Heights a love story? Is it romantic? Yes, it is a love story, but probably not a story about a kind of love you or I would really like to have. But it's definitely about love. Marriages are a central part of this story. People loving the wrong people, marrying the wrong people, then the right people trying to get married at the end, even though like they're cousins, so it's technically a bit weird, but it's as good as it's going to get for these characters, so we'll be happy for them and move on. But yeah, it's a love story. Yeah, it's not about a love that you would want for yourself, but it is about love. It's about a destructive love, a passionate love. Is it romantic? Kind of, but again, not a kind of romance that you would want. I think the central power of this story is that even though Catherine and Heathcliff are awful people, the truest thing about them is that they absolutely love one another. It's a love that kind of transcends all normal form of relationships. They know one another, they do understand one another, they long to be together, and they accept one another. They don't try and change one another. They know exactly who the other one is, and they love that. And maybe they shouldn't, but they do. Heathcliff would ruin the world and everything in it if it meant he could be with Catherine. She's all that really matters to him. Being with her, that is all he wants, and that is what he has set out to do. On the way, he's also happy to have vengeance on people around him, and Catherine ruined herself at the prospect of being without Heathcliff. That's what drives her into her final battle of madness, which does seem on one hand self-controlled, which is why Nellie was a bit like, she's having us on here, and yet it actually results in her death, because Catherine self-destructs when she realises that she's created a situation where Edgar and Heathcliff are going to fight to the point where she won't be able to see Heathcliff anymore. And I don't think she can really contemplate running away with him either. That's beyond her. Because for Catherine's faults, I think she also actually does love Edgar as well. She loves Heathcliff in a very primal way, but she does have affection for other people as well. And she can't reconcile the differences between them. And she can't go through it again losing Heathcliff. She did it once and she got through it. But to have received him back and the thought of losing him again, she just can't cope, and she self-destructs. She destroys herself. That's how much she loves him. Again, not healthy, but it is about love. Not the way I want to love people. And I would also say, if you don't think this is a love story, then it must be even more bleak to you than it is to me. Like, there are some bleak, harsh things in this book. But if there's no love in it, oh, that's even worse. Like, imagine doing all that destruction and pain and vengeance, and it's not even a little bit about love. That's a sad way to live your life. So I would say it is a love story. So yeah, not a love story to aspire to or long for, but a love story all the same, yes. And I will say, at the time, I'm a little bit frustrated that the trailers to the new Wuthering Heights film have made it look like it's all about lust. Because in my mind, lust doesn't feature too much in it with Heathcliff and Catherine, because you lust over what you can't have. And, this is going to sound contradictory, but when I read this book, I feel like Catherine and Heathcliff have each other completely. They are very secure in the place they have in one another's hearts. It's the world around them that they're struggling to like bend to their wills. So I don't think Catherine's looking at Heathcliff with just yearning, as if it's something that she can't have anymore. I think part of what makes the story tragic is that Catherine believes she'll always have Heathcliff no matter what she does. She's very very secure in believing Heathcliff is hers through and through, and then she accidentally drives him away. It was impossible for her to imagine, and then it happens. And when he comes back, she kind of regains that arrogance. So I don't see Heathcliff and Catherine kind of lusting after one another in that way, because they're already very confident that they've got one another. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody else, but it does to me. Is Heathcliff a villain or a victim? This is one where I do wobble. He is definitely a villain. He's a villain. He does horrendous things. He hangs a puppy. I mean, luckily the puppy survives, but he does do that. He hangs a puppy just to hurt Isabella and to kind of mask their getting away and eloping. He kidnaps young Catherine and forces her to marry his son. He delights in the pain and suffering of people who he's decided deserves it. Again, in like the Victorian romance trope, he is definitely the fiendish gentleman who comes in and seduces the innocent women and then brings them to ruin. He is the person masquerading as a gentleman who is no gentleman at all. He fits that archetype very, very well. But yes, he has also been subjected to physical abuse, poverty, degradation, financial abuse. You know, he was made into a slave servant in the house where he was once a son. So he does get to play both victim and villain, but I don't feel like one cancels out the other. Heathcliff's victimhood doesn't justify his villainous nature or even explain it overly much. It's just all a part of who he is. And I think Heathcliff is partly so fascinating because we are always kept back a little bit. You know, the person who would know him most is Catherine. but we see him mostly through Nellie's eyes. And to Nellie, he opens up quite a bit. But part of what makes it so fun is that Heathcliff is a bit mysterious. We never know him completely. We get little glimpses into his thoughts here and there, but it's hard to paint a full picture of Heathcliff. But we do get occasions, even from childhood, where he is very calculating and he is able to endure a lot to get what he wants. And some of the things that would have perhaps broken other people, he seems to be able to bear and use to his advantage. So like there's a scene early on where he wants Hindley to give him his horse, and Hindley's like, no, I'm not going to give you my horse. And they have an argument about it. And Hindley threatens to throw, I think like an iron weight or something at Heathcliff. And the book kind of tells us that Heathcliff kind of sees Hindley's about to do this and doesn't do anything to stop it, because Heathcliff is thinking, if Hindley throws it and it hits me, I can just go to our father and say, look, Hindley's done this, and then their father will make Hindley give Heathcliff the horse anyway. So Heathcliff doesn't defend himself, not because he thinks he deserves to be hit, but because he knows he can just use that to his advantage. And sure enough, Hindley hits him, and then Hindley realises too, if Heathcliff tells father, I'm going to be in trouble. So Hindley throws away at Heathcliff, hurts him, and gives him his horse anyway, because they both know that's going to be the outcome. But it's interesting to me that it shows from early on, Heathcliff will endure to get what he wants. He will anticipate suffering coming and not move to avoid it if he can use it to his will. So he is very calculating, and he doesn't respond necessarily how other people will. And I think that is what adds to his villainous nature and makes him very entertaining to read about. But he does have his tender moments too. Despite his best efforts, he grows actually affectionate towards Hareton, who is meant to be part of his final piece of revenge against Hindley. Heathcliff can't help liking Hareton, and Hareton in return loves Heathcliff. And there's a moment after Mr. Earnshaw dies that Catherine and Heathcliff as children, just after his funeral, they disappear off upstairs, and Nellie overhears them from the corridor, and they're taking it in turns to describe what heaven must be like, and imagining it, and imagining what Mr. Earnshaw must be doing in heaven. And it's perhaps one of the sweetest moments in the book, where Heathcliff and Catherine have both been devastated by the death of Mr. Earnshaw, their father. And yeah, they comfort each other with imaginings of heaven. So there are tender sides to Heathcliff too, that he mostly chooses to stamp out to enact his plans. Okay, next up. Is Heathcliff Mr. Earnshaw's illegitimate son? No. Not having it, because affairs and illegitimate children are boring. I'm sorry. They're done to death. They're in lots of other books. If you want to read about somebody having an affair and a secret love child and the anguish that can bring, knock yourself out. There are plenty of books that do that. I don't find that pretty interesting. And I also don't find much evidence in the text that that is what happened. Instead, I think actually it's much more tragic and compelling if the story is what is presented. Mr. Earnshaw on a trip to Liverpool spies this young, bedraggled child, like not even speaking English properly, maybe speaking a foreign language, or I don't know, a really strong Liverpool accent. And this child is starving and alone, and Earnshaw tries to find out who's responsible for this child and can't find anybody who is, and so takes him home. So Mr. Earnshaw does this one incredibly brave and generous act of compassion, and it leads to the complete ruin of his family home, because I think Mr. Earnshaw, like, he loves Heathcliff as the boy he rescued, but mingled in that love is Earnshaw's own self-righteous pride. He has done this amazing, generous thing. It's resented by everyone when he ought to be praised for it, in his mind. And he dotes on Heathcliff, not just as Heathcliff in his own rights, but because Heathcliff is this picture of this one time I did this amazing act of charity. Everything must be well because I've done this for this child, and Heathcliff is the symbol of earnshaw self-righteousness. So that's why he's pampered and coddled, and that leads to resentment and jealousy in the household. I think that is way more interesting than Heathcliff just being his illegitimate son. Other minor things. Isabella deserves more credit. She's often portrayed in adaptations as a wimpy, foolish teenage girl. But I think she has more spirit than it first appears. I mean, it's one thing quite bold of her to fall in love with Heathcliff anyway. And yes, she is spoilt and childish, but she is also, technically, yes, she is a spoilt child. She is a pampered daughter from a rich household, and she's very, very young when the story takes place. In fact, they're all very young when it starts. They're often much younger than what is portrayed in the adaptations. Like, I think Catherine dies when she's like 18, 19. But to give her credit, she's one of the only characters who does something sensible, which is when she finally realises that Heathcliff is not going to change from being an abusive, horrible husband towards her, she runs away. She gets herself out of the situation completely, and she goes to London, and she seems to live quite a happy life down there. And I would give her even more credit, apart from she happens to raise the most unlikable, horrible character in the whole of Wuthering Heights. And that is saying something. Wuthering Heights is filled with very badly behaved characters, but the worst of them is Linton Heathcliff, the son between Isabella and Heathcliff. And, you know, we debate all the time, oh, is Heathcliff a villain? Is he a victim? You know, he's a bit of both, but Linton Heathcliff is just a nightmare. Does he have one redeemable feature? I really don't think so. He is manipulative, self-interested, has no pity on Catherine, who is kidnapped and forced to be his wife, and who dotes on him. Like, Catherine amazingly loves Linton and nurses him and tries to look after him, and he never misses a chance to be cruel to her, and has no pity on her when she is separated from her dying father. He's just a nasty, nasty piece of work, and I don't get why there isn't more rage about him in the world and on the internet. He deserves it. Also, whilst we're talking about characters, what frustrated me on this last read through is Edgar's a bit of a dolt. I never quite know what to make about Edgar. Like, does he get infected by Catherine's strangeness? I just feel like a lot of sorrow and suffering could have been eased if, after Catherine died, Edgar just continued on with normal life. Like, if he'd still like met people and gone and done business and interacted a bit with society beyond his own household, then he wouldn't have raised his daughter as a recluse, and then maybe more people would have stepped in when she was kidnapped and forced to marry her cousin. Like, yeah, I feel like a lot of stuff wouldn't have happened if Edgar had just, you know, interacted like a normal human being. I kind of get why Heathcliff is a recluse. Edgar is just so sensitive to what he has been through that he actually ends up causing huge disadvantages for himself and his daughter, and that's a bit frustrating. But then again, maybe it was his sensitive nature that attracted Catherine to him. I don't know. Anyway, ooh, here's a good one. Is Nellie a hidden villain in the story? I'm sure I came across this theory when we were studying Wuthering Heights at A-level, I think. So it can be argued that Nellie is a hidden villain in the story because she is the keeper and revealer of secrets. And when you look at all of Nellie's actions throughout the book, you'll see that quite often it is her actions and her words that end up spurring on the next tragic incident to happen. She is the one who reveals hidden affairs. She decides whether or not to tell Edgar how sick Catherine is. And you could see her as almost being like a sprite-like creature, like a little house spirit that is manipulating events from the corners of the room. Which is quite an interesting way to look at her character, and I'm a little bit indulgent of it, but I see it more as Nellie is a warm heart of the story. She is a spirit of order in the midst of the chaos, and of just very good, sensible wisdom in the midst of flights of fancy and spiritualism. she's more homespun than that, and I really like that about her. And I'd say it adds a lot of depth to the book that Nellie is such a central part of it. In fact, that all the serving class are a big part of this story. It's not just about rich people talking in drawing rooms. Nellie connects us to the kitchens and the feeding and the farming of these estates, and I think it grounds us in the world a lot more. In fact, I think it's interesting that in Wuthering Heights, I think there are more named people, named characters in the serving class than there are of the gentry. And again, I just think that adds depth and flavour to this book. And I think it shows that Wuthering Heights is so compelling because it shows that there is the same amount of depth and personality in the serving class as there is in the class which is served. Nobody's just a simple stereotype, not even Joseph, who's often played for laughs. In fact, interesting thing to note is that when you get to the end of Wuthering Heights, just notice who actually is in charge of Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange at the end of the story. Because on one hand, you could look at it and go, actually, Joseph and Nellie end up being in control. Joseph is left on his own to manage Wuthering Heights, to, housekeep it and look after the grounds. So he's the last man standing there in his bitterness and grumpy, pious old ways. And Nellie is actually managing Thrushcross Grange on behalf of Catherine and Hareton, but they're too busy riding around the moors having a good time. She's the one managing their affairs. So on one hand, I don't think Nellie's a villain, but I have a seed of a doubt in that actually, she ends up managing Thrushcross Grange and Joseph ends up running Wuthering Heights. So there's a good class interpretation there somewhere. And by the way, reading this, I had a growing fondness for Joseph this time round. I have hated the character of Joseph so much reading this, partly because his dialogue is so hard to understand. And this is coming from somebody, I live just across the border from Yorkshire. I'm used to this kind of accent, but it is extreme. It is extreme and it is hard to read in the book. And Joseph is such a hypocrite and he twists the scriptures in such a horrible way, which as somebody of faith, it's really galling to read. But I don't know, I was amused more by Joseph when I realised how much his loyalties shift and squirm about and just how committed he is to being rude and obnoxious to the people who pay him and provide his bed. And he could have gone, if he really didn't like it that much, he could have tried to seek work elsewhere, but he deliberately stays in the place just so he can be surrounded by people to disapprove of. And on one hand, if that's what makes you happy, dude, I'm good for you. Good for you. Yes, I was amused by Joseph on my most recent read through. Is Heathcliff black? That gets debated a lot. I would say yes, he is dark-skinned and foreign-looking, but I think his ethnicity is also left ambiguous, and that is done deliberately. So yeah, he is dark-skinned, but you wouldn't be able to look at him and identify his race by how he looks. That's how I read it, and that's how it comes across to me. And his most distinguishing features, what really marks his appearance even more than being dark-skinned, is that he has long, dark, messy hair and a permanent scowl, especially as he's growing up. I imagine when he's more of a gentleman, it becomes more orderly, but it's his scowl that is his most defining feature. His look, his sullenness and surliness. That's what you need to get right in interpretation of Heathcliff. But yeah, he should be dark-skinned. Speaking of looks, the last one is, should Catherine ever be played by a 30-year-old woman with Californian blonde hair? I really don't think so. I think Catherine makes sense as a young Yorkshire girl. And if you were gonna have her older and blonde, you need to change the setting. You need to do like a 10 Things I Hate About You adaptation where you completely change the setting but keep the elements of the story. That could be cool. But Yeah, I'm sorry. She's not blonde and she's not adult. She is a very, very young woman and a girl for most of the story. Sorry. But yeah, really, Catherine, she's one with the Yorkshire moors. That the environment of Wuthering Heights is such a huge part of the story, and it is rugged and rustic and beautiful and wild. And that's what Catherine and Heathcliff both need to look like too. And that's a hard thing to put in a description, but it's essential, like that they really are of that place, which is partially why they make ghosts at the end, because that's where they're happiest, that's where they belong. So they need to look like they belong in it and are very comfortable in it and are enraptured by Yorkshire moors, as anybody would be who goes to visit them. Okay, so those are all the correct interpretations of Wuthering Heights, as told by me, a qualified reader of this book. I do love this story very, very much, and I don't really mind if you interpret it differently than me. I just hope you read it and really, really enjoy it. I just find it's one of those, like, whenever I'm reading it, it just consumes me, and when I'm not reading the book, it's still in my mind and I'm thinking all day long about what the characters are doing, and every time I read it there are certain points where I'm hoping against hope, like something different will happen this time and so will make it and you won't make that decision and they're going to stop Isabella running off with Heathcliff, and they never do. But every time I reread it I'm caught up in the moment of it, and I find it utterly, utterly compelling. I do understand why some people do not enjoy reading this book. I do get it. There are lots of things that objectively would be unenjoyable, but not to me. I just have a great time every time I reread this book. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it and we'll see you next time. Bye!